Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome back to Mohawk Motors. If it's your first time here, welcome to Mohawk Motors. My name is Jason, and we've got another project we're getting started on today. Now, this one is not mine. This is going to be for a customer. Very nice gentleman named Matt that lives nearby. He was referred to me by somebody else, and we talked and showed me what he wanted to do and talked, and we're gonna do some work on this truck. So what we have here is a 1986 Chevy K10, 8-foot bed, single cab, 4-wheel drive with an automatic transmission. Now, this truck Matt picked up a couple years ago. A previous owner before him, we believe, was a body tech, body professional, body work guy. And a lot of the body work on this truck, it looks like it's been restored already once before, and is still really in overall good condition. I mean, it's definitely driver condition for sure. But it suffered the fate that I've seen a lot of trucks suffer who are owned by people who are more skilled at making them beautiful than they are at making them functional. And under the hood of this thing, we've got it is a 350, but it looks like we're pretty sure it's a cobbled together from multiple engines to make one engine 350. And there's all kinds of electrical wiring chaos in this thing. See in here under the dash, we've got a nice extension cord bump, which is, I've never seen that before. That's interesting. And just overall, I mean, the body work, the sheet metal, the structure, the bones of the truck are good, but the drivetrain just leaves a lot to be desired for Matt. And he wants to get this thing dependable, reliable, and trustworthy. So you've probably already figured out what I'm going to be doing to it. We're going to LS swap this thing. We're going to put a 6-liter LQ4 engine into it with a 4L80E automatic transmission. And the goal here is to do it without having to change the length of the drive shafts or relocate the transfer case. So I'll get more and more into detail as we go. I want to try to share as much information as possible, so if this is something you're interested in doing, maybe this will help you do it as well. But the 350 and I believe 700R4 transmission are coming out. We're gonna do the 6-liter 4L80E swap into it. We're gonna use the factory PCM to run it. We'll get a fuel tank. We'll get the fuel system all set up to handle it. It is a heat-only truck, so we're not gonna have to do any air conditioning figuring out on this one, which does make it a bit simpler. And yeah, should be, I think it's going to be a relatively not difficult swap. That said, this is going to be just like all my other swaps. I want it to look like GM put it that way. So it's a lot of attention to detail, doing things correctly, and the electrical system, both functionality of it, as well as, you know, we want the factory gauges to work. We want to be able to, the factory speedometer to work, all that stuff. So we're going to be integrating some old with some new on this project. But before I can do any of that, I got to get the fluids drained out of it, and I got to get the old drivetrain out. I am going to do the best I can to save everything, because we may be able to reuse some of these parts, some of the hoses, maybe some of the wiring. We'll see what I find, and you know, we'll see what else we come across. But some of it we'll be able to reuse, some of it we're going to have to buy some new stuff. And as always, you know, I try to take things apart, just unbolt it. No, you don't have to be destructive to get things apart, and it'll make it easier to get it back together. So yeah, that's enough rambling for now. First step, drain all the fluids, obviously, and then get it unbolted, get it lifted up out of there. And I'll probably just bring you back when I'm done. You know, taking stuff apart, pretty much anybody can figure out how to get an engine and a transmission out of a truck. And then when we start putting things back together, that'll be where you may or may not need some of my information. So let's get to it. All right, everybody, well, it's a couple days later now, and the engine's out. Actually, the drivetrain is out. Engine, transmission, and transfer case are all out. I went ahead and pressure washed the engine bay. Got everything all cleaned off as best I can. I still need to go through and weed out some of this stuff. There's some power wires here that were, I guess a previous owner had used them at some point for something. They just go back and end at the rear of the truck. I got to get those out. There's like 3 or 4 hoses poked through the firewall that weren't connected to anything, aren't connected to anything. So I got to get rid of those and block off those holes in the firewall. And once it's all dried off, I'll probably give the frame a fresh coat of black paint here just to, you know, tidy it up a bit and make it look a little bit better. And then there's the old stuff. The old 700 R4 was working, but, you know, went along with the old 350. But Matt's looking to upgrade. I mean, I'm not sure what 350 that is. I don't believe it's the original one to the truck. But that thing was probably from the factory, rated for what, maybe 150 horsepower. So he's gonna just going with a stock LQ4. Matt's gonna be doubling the horsepower in the truck. And then going with the 4L80E, also gonna have a substantially stronger transmission. I got the transfer case also. This is an NP208. This is the C Chevrolet version. We're gonna be reusing this. GM put them behind Turbo 400s so you can get a factory 32 spline input for them. And that will make it work with the 4L80 32 spline output shaft. So we'll be able to reuse that transfer case. And as I said before, I'm pretty confident we're going to be able to keep the transfer case in the same position because our motor mount adapters allow us to move the engine forward just a little bit of the factory location. And by doing that, we'll be able to keep the transmission cross member and transfer case right where they were. So that's it for today. I'm going to let everything dry off. All right, everybody, so it's next day again, and kind of a rainy, dreary day today, so I'm working in the garage. And this is the engine going into Matt's truck. Now it's a 2006 LQ4 out of a Denali. So it's a drive-by-wire engine. Originally came with a 4L60E behind it, but not difficult to convert to run a 4L80E, which we'll get into that later. But the one thing I do need to do, Matt actually stopped by yesterday while I was or right before I got his engine and stuff pulled out, and we were talking about it, and he wants this thing to be nice. So Matt wants to paint the engine before we put it in the truck, which isn't a big deal. I was going to strip the harness off of it anyway, just to make it easier to move it around, get it in and out, and make the changes I need to make to the harness itself. But that's also going to make it easier to get cleaned up and ready for painting. And I'll strip everything else off of it too. We're going to be resealing this engine. So basically, to prep this and get ready to start putting things back together is what I'm going to focus on right now, which is get the harness off of it, get the accessories off of it, get the exhaust manifolds off of it, and then start getting it cleaned. So taking stuff apart again, like I don't need to show you a how-to video of how to get this stuff apart. It's very simple to get the harness off the engine, the accessories. So I'm just gonna get that stuff pulled off, and then I'll bring you back when I'm done. Well, it's all stripped down. This is as far as I like to take them before I pressure wash them. I like to leave the exhaust manifolds on because that helps prevent water from blowing back up into the cylinders and sitting in there in case any of the exhaust valves are open. That's the same reason I leave the intake manifold on. It'll prevent any water from getting into the cylinders through an intake valve that may be open. I'll put a rubber glove over the throttle here just to keep any water from blowing in through there. And then I'll soak it with Easy Off oven degreaser. I find that stuff works really well, and honestly, like, better than any engine degreaser that I've tried. So I'll use that, get it all cleaned off, and then prep it to be resealed and painted. So I'm out of time for today, but that's good progress. We're moving in the right direction. I did also remove the engine oil cooler plumbing. We're not going to be using that. We're just going to have the factory bypass plate there, which also makes a good place to mount our oil pressure sensor. The Squarebody style trucks use an electronic oil pressure sensor that will fit down there, and I can retain the factory oil pressure sensor up here. So the computer will get its oil pressure information from that sensor. The gauge will get its information from the sensor down here from the little bypass plug. So yeah, that's it for today. I'm running out of time. I got stuff to do. So I'll pick back up on this thing when we're ready to do a little bit more prep. I'm pretty sure I left off telling you guys my next step was to get the engine all cleaned up and prepped, right? So I used a needle scaler to get all the flaking paint and rust off of the engine, then hosed it down with some degreaser, pressure washed it all off. I do leave the exhaust manifolds and intake manifold on the engine while I do that. I put one rubber glove over the throttle body, and then I put a rubber glove over each exhaust downpipe. And that way it just helps to keep water out of the engine. I don't want water getting down in the cylinders while I'm doing that. But it cleaned up really well. I mean, the block, you can see it's got some flash rust on it because that needle scaler took it right down to bare metal. And then the degreaser helped clean off any grease that was on there. So Matt's coming by this evening to make a final decision on how he wants to paint this. Does he want to paint just the block, just the short block, including the front rear covers and oil pan, or the entire long block, valve covers down? So once he gives me a decision on that, we'll get that done. And then it's probably going to be time to start getting things put back together, which will mean time to start the next video on this project. I stole the clamshells off of the old 350. I stole the wire harness off the old 350 because I'm going to need those to get this engine in there. I've got my wire harness to run the LS here. It's a factory harness. In a later video, I'm going to show you what I'm doing to make it run in this setup. And not crazy modifications, guys. It's pretty simple. And we're going to do it using the factory harness, so we have a clean factory appearing wiring system. So I think that's it for now. I'll pick you guys back up later on this evening, and then I think it's going to be time to start the next video and start putting things back together. Woohoo! Well, everybody, last night Matt stopped by. We got his paint figured out. So today I'm getting the engine ready to be painted. So I've got the front cover off, the harmonic balancer off, as well as the oil pan off. I've got the gasket surfaces scraped clean. I also have the oil pump pickup tube taken off. I'm not taking this engine any further apart. here's the magic to LS swaps, team. If you can hear the engine run and see the engine run before you buy it, verify that it does all the right things, right? Has good oil pressure at idle. I like at least 30 pounds of oil pressure at a hot idle. Make sure it's not making any weird ticks or noises or anything like that. If it passes those checks, don't mess with it. Leave it alone. Don't take it apart. You don't need to go any further than this. The windage tray doesn't need to come off of it. Nothing else. The oil pump doesn't need to come off. The timing chain doesn't need to come off. Leave all that stuff alone. It's not broken. Don't fix it. If it was running good when you pulled the engine out, or you heard it running good shortly before you purchased it, whatever the case may be, don't mess with it. So this one, I provided this engine. I know it ran good. It held 40 psi of oil pressure at idle. It had zero top end noises. This was a quiet, smooth, good running engine. So I'm not gonna mess with it. I'm not gonna let the magic out of it. I'm gonna put a new oil pump pickup O-ring on it. I'm gonna put a new gasket set on it, the oil pan gasket, front cover, front main seal, rear cover, rear main seal, and valve cover seals. And then I'm not doing anything else to this engine. I'm gonna paint it, we're gonna send it, and it's probably gonna run for 1,000,000 miles without having any problems. So I'm gonna get this, my last little preps here. I'm gonna wipe down my gasket sealing surfaces with brake clean. I'm gonna lay my gaskets on. I'm gonna get the pickup tube put back in and bolted down. And then I'm gonna put this thing back together, mask it off, and you'll see me painting it. Don't let the magic out of them. So far looking good. Got the oil pan all cleaned up. It really, I mean, it only took just a little scrub in the parts washer. There really was not, it was a very clean oil pan. There's no stuff in the bottom of it. A little bit of like the, you know, your normal, ooh, sorry, a little bit of your normal brown from just miles, but otherwise, very clean inside. So I'll get the baffle put back into it. I got all my gasket surfaces all cleaned up, ready to go. Pickup tube is back in with the new O-ring on there. If it's your first time doing this, when this pickup tube goes in, you'll know you have the right O-ring because it should almost, like it should resist as you push, and then it should almost kind of pop into place and it'll be fully bottomed out. And then all you'll have to do is just put a little snug on the 10mm retainer bolt. Yeah, and obviously the two 13mm nuts that help hold the tube where it belongs. But other than that, this thing's it's ready to be put back together. So I'm gonna get the baffle in, get the gasket on, and get it all tightened down and sealed back up. All right, it's in primer. You see I've got it all coated, nice and gray. Matt wanted from the heads down painted, so I masked off the heads on both sides, masked off the valley cover and the steam port crossover tube. I think this is going to look really good once we get it painted. We're doing gloss black, so once we get it all painted with the final color, I'll bring you back and show you, but I think it's going to look really good. One thing I didn't show you, well, it's not that I didn't, it's that I really wasn't able, is I'm kind of battling some humidity today. And if you've never painted an engine block before, you'll notice once you get it clean, they almost instantly flash rust. And that's because the humidity in the air is attracted to the iron. Cast iron is hydroscopic, meaning it draws water in. So to get that water out, to make sure your paint sticks, you got to heat the iron, and in this case the aluminum also, since we painted the oil pan and the front cover too. So I was more or less going two-handed of heat it up with the torch so I can see all the moisture leave the area, keep it warm, and then stop torching, start spray painting. So I kind of broke it into quadrants. I did one side, then the front, then the other side, and then the back. And that was enough space that I was able to keep the iron warm enough that the moisture didn't return from the humidity, and then get the paint sprayed on. So the whole engine is warm to the touch, and that, like I said, that'll keep the humidity out of the iron, so the paint will really stick. It should stay on it for a long time. Painted the oil pan also. I've got all my little holes plugged off. It turns out your little low oil level sensor, as well as your crank position sensor holes, if you've got some spare valve stems laying around, those are great little plugs for that. And then the oil dipstick hole, I just used a little vacuum plug. I just left the bolts right in the holes for the motor mounts. We're not putting an AC bracket back on there, so didn't need to worry about those holes. And what else? I put my old seal from the timing cover back on the outside of the new seal, so kept my new seal looking nicer. But I think I think it's gonna turn out really well. This is the first time painting an engine for a customer. Pretty sure it's the first time I've shown you guys painting an engine. So I'm excited. I think it's gonna look really good. It's gonna look good in the truck. But I gotta let it cure for an hour, then I can start putting the black on it. So I'm gonna find something else to work on while I wait. Woo! It's hot today, but the engine is painted. Just got done spraying the second coat of black, and it's looking really good. So while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm gonna get the valve cover gaskets replaced. I've got new valve cover gaskets right here. And I got the ignition coil packs cleaned up, the oil level sensor cleaned up. So I'll get those valve cover gaskets replaced, and then I'm gonna pick the coil, stick the coil packs and the oil level sensor back on it. And then that'll probably be it. I'm just gonna call it for the day. Let the paint cure. All right, everybody, check it out. She's all done being painted. I pulled all my masking off. So I just need to let the paint cure. I'm gonna give it overnight to cure and set. That way, hopefully I won't mess any of it up trying to get things put back together. But I think that's where I'm gonna call it for this video. You saw the, getting things apart, starting to get things prepped to go together. This was the last big prep that I need to do to put things together. And then next video, we'll start getting things assembled, getting things fit into the truck, doing some test fitting, all of that stuff. So yeah, that's it. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and until the next video, everybody, take care.